Real quick before we jump into the video, guys, for the rest of this year I'm going to be on a fundraising campaign to raise a minimum of £1,000 for the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. For more information on the charity and what it does, and for the donation links, please look in the description below. And thank you all for your continued support. Enjoy the show. What's going on, guys? Rivalry Teacher in the house, and we are here with our draft breakdown for the RBL Season 3. The Royal Bomber Bombies are back after a bit of an absence of competitive content from this channel. I took a break from draft league content after RBL Season 2 because I was a little bit burnt out. I do apologize to all those leagues that did invite me to play. Unfortunately, I ended up not joining any of them, but we're back. The RBL is back, of course. I even made myself a shirt for this season, and I'm not selling that shirt. It is for me only. I'm sorry, guys. But if you do want some RBL merch, I will leave the RBL merch store as well as the doc down in the description below. Feel free to go check that out at your leisure. If you do want to rep the Royal Bomber for Bombies this season, however, over in my merch store, I have actually put RBL merch up there for you to buy. Make sure you use code RBOMBY for 10% off. Thank you to Savzilla, of course, for partnering us on our adventures. Always a pleasure working with you guys. But this is time for breakdown. Now, to talk about the league this time, we've had a few changes to the rule set and number of coaches this season. We've got 16 coaches this season instead of 12 last season. And also some rule changes in the draft, such as if you draft a G-Max, the regular form is no longer draftable and stuff like that. Was also a rule change. And also the G-Max pick this season can not only G-Max, it can G-Max or Dynamax this season. So that's a bit of a rule change as well. Not entirely sure I agree with that one, but we will skip that as we go by. Pick position for us. Obviously, last season we were fortunate enough to be first pick. This season, unfortunately, we were 8th pick, which is the worst place to be. Right bang smack in the middle of the draft is not fun. That is usually snipe territory. But I'm super excited for this draft. We got a really, really solid draft out of this team, out of this pick position, which I did not expect to happen. So let's go through our first pick of the draft, the stats and the ability you can see on the screen, but a pick that went all the way down to me, which surprised me a little bit, was Whimsicott. So, Whimsicott's a pick that pretty much every VGC player always eyeballs when it comes to draft. It is a phenomenal support Pokemon. Obviously, with that 116 base speed, it is faster than most Pokemon in the format as well, which is pretty exceptional. Prankster is so good. It gets access to things like Tailwind and Trick Room, which is really, really strong, so I can be an absolute cuck with a lot of Trick Room teams. I can just deny them Trick Room with running Trick Room myself, or just running Taunt, which it also gets. It gets Grassy and Misty Terrain, which is pretty nice as well, so any like electric terrain setters, or psychic terrain setters like Indeedee. I think it's Ban has Indeedee Hatteran, so I could just deny that, which is pretty nice. Gets things like Switcheroo as well, so I could maybe Switcheroo some eject buttons or some lagging tails on some things, which is something I did last season with Grimmsnarl, so it's a strategy I'm not adverse to using. Gets things like Charm as well, so I can cripple physical attackers. Gets Light Screen, which is pretty nice. I can cripple damage from special attackers. It's a really, really solid support Pokemon. Gets things like Helping Hand too. And actually, it can do a sizable amount of damage too. It's also solid in Sun. It does get access to Chlorophyll as an ability. So that's pretty handy for it. It is a really, really strong Pokemon. It's very well rounded. It's very versatile. It fits on just about any team that you really want to put it on. So this thing is really, really strong. And I'm super excited that we got to pick it from pick 8. That is a bit of a surprise to me. This is normally a very early pick. But I think that's testament to just how strong the draft board is in general. There's a lot of power in the VGC draft, especially in Tier 1. So, very, very challenging to build a team. I did not expect to get this pick, but I'm really happy we got it. Now, the next pick, honestly, I shouldn't necessarily have picked this pick now. I could have picked it probably around later. But I was a little bit worried about it getting sniped because Saiyan Bush Sr. was immediately after me because he was pick 7, so he was picked before me in the draft. And I wouldn't be too surprised if he picked this up, but I took it anyway. I had the option for Zapdos here if I wanted it. That came back to me. Obviously, Whimsicott Zapdos is pretty well known in VGC format. But I went with an old classic. I picked up Terrakion. Now, Terrakion might not seem like it makes too much sense here, but Whimsy Terrakion has been a known VGC strategy since Generation 5 when it was introduced. It is very, very scary. Thanks to Justified, Whimsicott does get beat up, which I did reveal one of my strategies there. Potentially, beat up is not something you bring every week, but given the fact that beat up hits 4 times, that gives Theralltaken plus 4 attack, which when you Dynamax it is incredibly powerful, especially with those stab max knuckles. Theralltaken gets a lot of coverage moves as well, which is really, really handy for us. We can definitely play a lot. I forgot to change the stats over, but you can see it already has insane attack stat, as well as a good speed tier. This means that under Tailwind, I outrun Regieleki, which is pretty nice. Especially as I do get coverage moves to one-shot Regieleki, and even stab moves can knock it out, to be fair. Especially when you're hitting plus 4 attack. This thing hits like a truck. It just does so much damage. It is terrifying at its best. Obviously, the beat up is really nice. The Tailwind from the Whimsicott is handy as well. This thing does a lot of damage, and it has very, very solid defensive stats. 91, 90, 90 is a pretty good pool of health, especially from an offensive Pokemon. You definitely like to see that, especially when you Dynamax. So, very, very scary. It's worth pointing out we are in Series 9 format, not Series 10, which is a little bit unfortunate. If we were in Series 10, I probably wouldn't draft this. But nonetheless, we are fine. Obviously, Theralltaken also does fairly well. Covering against steals, which Whimsicott doesn't want to take because of that fighting stab just blows it up. Obviously, Theralltaken also weak to steel, does kind of suck. But we can deal with it reasonably well. But, obviously, Whimsicott does have another weakness as well, which is poison. Being quad weak to poison does not help. And obviously, Theralltaken being weak to psychic is not the most helpful thing in the world. So, my next pick kind of covered for both of those and also paired up really nicely with these two. And I was shocked that I got this, and this was a pretty good snipe from Empathic, who was seemingly doing an Ultra Beast draft. We picked up Celesteela next. Now, Celesteela, obviously another Tier 1. So we have 3 Tier 1 picks in the draft already, which is pretty insane. But the fact that we managed to get all 3 is nuts to me. This thing is very, very versatile. 61 base speed is not really that great, but it can function under Trick Room if I want to opt that way. This thing can be offensive or defensive on either side. It is exceptionally good at that. Can be policy, can be AV, can be a lot of different things. Gets way too many coverage moves to name. It's pretty insane how much this can do. Obviously, Beast Boost boosting up its best stat. Pretty scary to deal with, especially if you're not prepared for it. Obviously, this thing being immune to poison definitely helps Whimsicott out a lot. And obviously, resisting Psychic is even better. Gets enough coverage that I can blow back just about anything that wants to knock this out. And to be fair, this pairs out really nicely with Theralltaken as well. It covers Theralltaken's weaknesses. And Theralltaken can cover Celesteela's weaknesses. So, we are very, very solid in this position. We've got a very powerful draft already. Just these 3 picks alone is enough to really put a hole in a lot of teams. Obviously, Trick Room is an issue, but Whimsicott has Trick Room itself, so not a big deal for me to deal with. So, looking at this team, obviously Celesteela's main problem is Regieleki. Regieleki is a huge answer to Celesteela, obviously being able to outpace it. Pretty much guaranteed, even under Tailwind. Always outpaces and then hits hard with those Transistor Magnet boosted or Specs boosted, depending on how Saiyambush Senior wants to run it. Can just one-shot most forms of Celesteela. So I needed something that could kind of deal with that and pressure it. And sitting in Tier 2, which honestly probably shouldn't have got back to me from this point in the draft. A lot of people still needed dragons. And I was eyeing up things like Dragonite and Goodra and stuff like that to kind of potentially look at dealing with this. Rotten actually took Dragonite, so that was a pick that was taken off me. Not really sniped, to be honest, because it wasn't my first choice regardless, because my first choice was Garchomp. Now, Garchomp is an insane physical attacker, but also has incredible bulk to go with it. Obviously, being ground type definitely helps as well, because that means I'm then immune to Regieleki's main stab choices. But as you can see, looking at our stat pool and our ability, of course, I forgot to change this to Rough Skin, that's my fault. Rough Skin means that any physical forms of Regieleki just gets bounced back. I can also run Rocky Helmet with this if I really wanted to double down on the damage. Garchomp's also a fairly solid option for weakness policy. Obviously, Whimsicott being naturally fast, I can just Moonblast into it. There are a couple of other picks that I have that also can enable weakness policy Garchomp if I wanted to, which we will talk about as we get further down. But we have plenty of options here. There's a lot of things that Garchomp does really well. Can be physical. 80 special attack might not seem like a lot, but it is actually passable. I've seen quite a few Garchomps run Fire Blast just to cover for the steals as well. Now, look, may not be good for Theralltaken, but we will see. Garchomp fits pretty nicely under Tailwind as well with Whimsicott, which is also very nice. Helps with the poison problem that Whimsicott has. Garchomp kind of scares them off. This thing does a lot of damage. Its max moves are very, very strong. Max Quake giving it a buff to special defense. Max Whirlwind crippling physical attackers. Definitely very scary and something that most people would have to play against me would have to deal with. If there's too many threats on my team right now, I have such a good offensive damage profile with Theralltaken, Celesteela, and Garchomp that this team is already very scary. That being said, though, I do have 2 physical offense and 1 special offense mon in general, because I don't tend to class Whimsicott as a special offensive mon. It's more of a utility support. But that does mean, of course, that I can bring in my next pick, which I opted for my G-Max here. I had 2 options as to which one I would take. Charizard and Inteleon were the last 2 remaining G-Maxes up. Saiyan actually drafted the G-Max Charizard immediately before me. But left up was Inteleon, so we picked it up. Now, G-Max Inteleon's a very, very interesting pick. It's very, very fast at 120 speed, and 125 special attack is pretty high. G-Max Hydra Snipe, Ben, I'll correct you from your RBL ranking video. It is not 180 base power guaranteed, it's 160 base power guaranteed, much like the Fireball and the Drum Solo from the other 2 starters. But it does ignore abilities, which is disgustingly strong, especially as there are a couple of people, I think, that drafted Water Absorb mons. Or things that are generally not gonna deal with it. Notably, there were some Water Absorb mons that didn't get picked that should be, but we will get into that in another video maybe. Sniper, of course, is exceptional, meaning crits do more damage. Hydra Sniper is very, very powerful. Things like Scope Lens is exceptional on this mon. I could run other things. This thing gets a lot of utility moves too. It gets screens. It can be very solid in terms of priority moves as well. This thing does actually get Ice Shard, so I can actually use it to proc Garchomp if I needed to go that route. Or just do a lot of offensive carries as well. This thing gets good utility moves. It gets a very strong move called Tearful Look, which drops attack and special attack of the targeted Pokemon, which is very, very handy against offensive threats, particularly Dynamax users. So Inteleon is very, very scary. And even under Tailwind, it outruns max speed Regieleki, which can force it into a Scarf, which nobody really wants to run Scarf Regieleki. That's kind of dumb. But, you know, the option is there for Saiyan, who we do actually face in Week 1. So that's why I'm talking about Saiyan a lot more. But Inteleon, very, very strong. Very, very hard-hitting. 85 attack doesn't seem that impressive, but actually, it does get some pretty good physical moves that I can take advantage of. So I can make good use of this pick, in my opinion. And I think it does give me good damage profiles. So now I have 2 physical and 2 special attackers on this team, which can really, really be very scary for any opponent having to deal with it. Obviously, my team is fast, so that's something that I do have to consider. Trick Room is definitely a very real threat to me. There are a couple of very good Trick Room teams in the league this season, but not that many, so hopefully we can find a way through. So, drafting Inteleon did give me an extra electric weakness, which is something that I knew if I was going to pick either Inteleon or Charizard, I was going to have to deal with either way. So, obviously, looking at electric and how to deal with electric, obviously we have a ground type in Garchomp already, so I didn't need to go down that route. But another route which is very, very interesting to go down is Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is a very, very strong ability which redirects electric type moves into the user that has Lightning Rod and gives it a special attack boost. Obviously, unfortunately, Raichu is a tier 2 pick because it's a very, very strong support, and I couldn't afford that because I drafted 3 tier 1s. However, sitting in tier 3 is Manectric, and Manectric is a pretty passable mod, actually. Gets a lot of good utility moves. Obviously, Static is actually also a nice ability, but Lightning Rod is the reason I drafted it. But this thing, obviously, being pretty pacey. Decent amount of special attack. Lightning Rod giving it special attack boost is really nice. This thing does get decent coverage moves. Gets fire moves as well, which is pretty nice in Flamethrower and Overheat. Does get Snarl as well, so it can be good utility. Does get screens. So this thing can be pretty interesting. Obviously, Rising Voltage, if I do go for electric terrain, is also viable as well. Now, I could even max this if I wanted to. This could be a very, very big threatening max. I have a bunch of good max targets on this team. That's something that is very, very scary for anyone that has to deal with this team. I've got so many good max targets, which seems to be a hallmark of my drafts. My drafts in the last couple of seasons have had an insane amount of max targets. This team is no exception. This team definitely has a lot of that. But Lightning Rod is the main reason for drafting this. This can be very, very strong offensively. Under Tailwind, I outrun Regieleki and can one-shot it even with a fire move. Obviously, I can Snarl cripple it as well, which is always handy to have. This thing, I believe, gets Eerie Impulse as well, so I can cripple special attackers that way if I need to. This thing gets a lot of moves. I can also run a very sneaky play where I can actually Volt Switch into Celesteela, proc its own weakness policy, and switch out. That's something else I can also do, which is pretty fun. That can also work for Inteleon as well, so there's a lot of cool things I can do with this. If I can pull some of this team off, we're in a very, very good spot. We have a good damage profile, we have very, very passable offensive power, and we have good support around it. So this alone is a very, very scary draft. So the rest of the draft for me was largely just patching up some things that I would like to gain access to. As you can see right now, we don't actually have a fire type. We do have our Fairy Dragon Steel Core completed, but we don't have our Fire Water Grass completed yet. And I do like my competitive cores. They are very handy to have access to. So we are going to work alongside that. Also just noticed there was some audio playing in the background. I apologize if you could hear that. But yep, obviously we are working our way through the draft at this point. We've got 4 picks left, and I've got only lower tiers options available to me, apart from a tier 3. So I have a tier 3, a tier 4, and 2 tier 5s that I still need to pick, because of the way free points work. And sitting in tier 4, I had a bunch of good fire options. Combustion was still sitting there, Reboot was still sitting there, and the pick we ended up going for, actually, is gonna be Torracat. Torracat, pretty interesting pick. Obviously, Baby Incineroar, essentially, that's what most people refer to it as. Torracat, a little bit faster, 90 base speed, less bulky, but you do run a Violate on it, so it does still have very passable bulk in general. Really solid move pool, Fake Out, Parting Shot, Snarl, U-Turn if I want it, Will-O-Wisp. Pretty solid options for it. This definitely can cripple a lot of teams. Fun fact, this thing can actually be just as good as Incineroar if it's played correctly. Obviously, the Intimidate is pretty nice. The Fake Out support is definitely handy as well. This can do pretty well on this team. This can guarantee that I can get some things set up, like Fake Out Tailwind for Whimsicott, for example. Stuff like that. There's a lot of fun little plays I can do with Torracat, and I'm pretty excited to give this thing a go. I don't see too many people using it, obviously, because Incineroar is, like, #1. But Torracat's going to be fun. I'm excited to give this thing a go. See how well I can use this thing. But yeah, Torracat, definitely handy, and actually could be okay offensively. I've never used offensive Torracat, so we'll see how well that goes if I do opt to try it. But there might be a couple of teams I can do that with. But next up, we dip down into tier 5, as some people at this point in the draft were taking their tier 5 picks. So looking further down, I wanted additional Fake Out support, because Fake Out is pretty handy for this team. This can definitely enable me to get certain things set up. And sitting down in tier 5 is going to be a pretty interesting pick. Not something you see every day, but we picked Cantonia Meowth. Meowth, honestly, not the best in the world when it comes to actual genuine support. But what this thing does give me is good Fake Out support, obviously. He does get a decent amount of move pool. It gets a very wide plethora of coverage moves, which are all boosted by Technician, which is pretty nice. Obviously, its attacking stats is not that great, but does give me Fake Out support, gives me a Ghost immunity as well, which is pretty nice. Can be good for knockoff and various other things. But yeah, Meowth, just there for Fake Out, basically. Essentially, that's what I wanted it for. I didn't necessarily need it for anything else. I might swap this out for a Lowland Meowth. I haven't decided on that yet. But we are potentially not going to go for that at this point in time. But Meowth, Technician support, Fake Out, always handy to have access to. We definitely work well with it, so let's give that a go. Now, next up is my other tier 5 pick. This is a pick that I think might actually not be the best, but we opted for it anyway, and we opted for a Lowland Vulpix. Now, essentially, what I was looking for with this pick is potentially an alternate weather setter. Obviously, yes, I can set up weather with things like Inteleon, Whimsicott, even Torracat, and stuff like that. Even Meowth gets weather setting moves if I really feel the need to run it. But I wanted an actual ability setter. This basically just gives me an anti-weather option. And this does also have a low base attack. It's actually lower attack than Ninetales, so I can actually potentially Ice Shot into Garchomp if I really feel the need to, or even run Weakness Policy Whimsicott, which would be kind of fun to try to do. And stuff like that. This could be a good policy enabler. Obviously, Snow Warning is not the best for my team. I don't really have a Hail Abuser, although I do have a couple of Pokemon on my team that gain good ice coverage, so might be able to take advantage of it. We'll see. But this is generally just a way to kind of give me an additional option against Weather Setters, but does actually have purpose on this team. So, could be worth using. Maybe not, but decent enough option to consider. And then my last pick. So, I like to save some of my most interesting picks for last. And a lot of people were wondering what my tier 3 was going to be left at. And I had two options, but I never thought I would see the day that this would ever happen. But we drafted the biggest abomination in existence. Wobbuffet. So, alright, let me explain this one, because a lot of people were like, oh, he's just memeing at this point. But Wobbuffet actually can be passable on this team. Trapping is very, very scary for opponents to have to deal with. So Shadow Tag is pretty worthwhile. Especially if I get, you know, things like Garchomp, Terrakion, Celesteela, and Talion enabled. If they're all enabled to just set up and sweep, I can trap things, prevent opponents from switching out into their counters, and really start putting in work. This thing is actually surprisingly worth using. Obviously, Counter Miracle is pretty much its only damage profile, and Destiny Bond can pick up a kill, which is pretty handy to have access to, because it's very hard to take it down. So we have options here. I was looking at other Pokemon, and there are definitely better Pokemon on this team. But I wanted to try Wobbuffet. It's going to be funny. Wobbuchan, of course, is on the team, which, of course, my lot in my community are all going to be excited for, because Wobbuchan is Wobbuchan. I'm looking forward to trying to use it against Average in Week 7. That's going to be good fun. But yeah, that's going to be our draft. So, question, of course, for you guys is, who do you think the MVP of this season is going to be? My money's on Terrakion, but it could be on just about any of this picks. There's a lot of good picks here. So I'm excited for it. And of course, if you're excited for the return of the Royal Bomber for Bombies, make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below if you're new, so you never miss an RBL video. But as always, thanks so much for watching. My name is Rabombi Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bomber for Bombies. Stay safe, stay awesome, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it. And if you liked the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell on so that you never miss an upload. We upload every single day on this channel. Make sure you're following me on all of my social medias on the screen right now. And a huge shout out to the Shiny Rabombies of this month: Araya Jade, The Crazed Artist, Mr. Burns 1988, and Average Gaming 017. Thank you all for your continued support.